go around and ask if you have any questions for tonight's agenda. Councilor Rosati? More?
No, thank you.
Councilor Emmons?
Yep, I just asked that there was a revision from David Carpenter, or excuse me, from John Carpenter to David Carpenter, and it has since been revised and uploaded to correct the minutes.
Perfect. Councilor Baker? Councilor, or Mayor Pro Tem?
Nope.
Councilor McMillan? And I don't have any, so quickly, any council reports?
Last Wednesday, along with many that were available, the Chamber of Commerce State of the City went very well. Job of the mayor and city manager on that, and then I was able to attend the Growing Home What's Cooking Pizza Edition for Growing Home, something new that they've done instead of their celebrity chef. And then, along with many here, attended the Sheridan Green Open House on Thursday. That was extremely well attended, so good information there, and that was it for last week.
Thank you. Councilor Emmons?
I also attended the Sheridan Green open house, and it was well attended, lots of great information.
Councilor Baker? Mayor Pro Tem?
Some of the same State of the City, Sheridan Green Open House. The other thing I wanted to give an update, and I think you guys, council, saw the notes from the inclusivity meeting that I had on Thursday. Was able to work through and figure out a way forward that they supported, so I believe I saw them get a note today that there was support for the 2 different proclamations, so they should be joining us on October 9th for that.
Good work. Councilor McMillan?
Other than attending State of the City, I had to miss the Sheridan Green. I don't remember why, but looking at my calendar, there's like 6 things on that evening, so I'm like, which one did I go to? So, sorry I missed that.
That's good. Councilor Zadi and I were at, and city manager were at Town Hall with Congressman Pedersen last week. She had a good turnout. It started out slow, but people kept coming in. NADA last week, the news hasn't been reporting quite correctly, so we need to help get the word out. Whether we can do it on our social media, I don't know, but kids 19 and under are free this school year, 2023 through 24, and they're looking at subsequent years, but they are free. So it's been through August, but it's going to be free the school year, so September through whenever it ends in May or whatever. So we just all said they're getting, the news has gotten sort of mixed up, I guess, and so not all the correct information is out there, and so RTD just asked us to help get that. Yeah. Sheridan Green was great, open house, and I didn't get you an email because I've been crazy busy, but I probably had at least 10 phone calls from the neighborhood of people that couldn't be there that night, and their input would have been for the mixed use of adults, kids, using it like a school has been used, education, learning, fun. So I said I would share that with you. On Saturday, I was asked to welcome the state DAR folks that were in town. They were at the Marriott in Church Ranch, and so I went over and said that, and then went home and taught a class on Zoom. So do we have a reason for executive session?
Mayor, the pre-meeting agenda tonight includes an executive session title to consult with the city attorney on legal issues associated with possible censure of councilor conduct pursuant to Westminster Municipal Code 1113C8 and Colorado Revised Statute 246402-4B.
I will go around and ask you to state your name and if you're willing to go into executive session.
Hobie Azadi, yes.
Rich Seymour, yes.
Lindsay Emmons, yes.
Bruce Baker, yes.
Steve Demott, yes.
Sarah Nermella, yes.
Nancy McNally, yes. Okay.
Okay, while we transition on.
Welcome to tonight's meeting of August 28th, 2023. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the Westminster City Council meeting for August 28th, 2023. We thank you for coming and would like to remind all in attendance that our meetings are subject to rules of decorum and that they are posted at the back of the room. These rules also reflect while in our meetings are in session, as well as during breaks and transitions between meetings. We want to be sure all feel welcome and remind all that there is an expectation that no attendee shall disrupt this meeting, and the threats and intimidation are prohibited. Signs and placards are prohibited in council chambers, and all attendees shall remain seated at the seats provided, not in the aisles, nor shall the doorways be blocked. Roll call, please.
Counselor Baker.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Demott.
Present.
Counselor Emmons.
Present.
Counselor Azadi.
Here.
Mayor McNally.
Here.
Counselor Nermella.
Here.
And Counselor Seymour.
Here.
That brings us to consideration of minutes. Councilor Emmons.
I move to approve the minutes of the August 14th to 2023 meeting as presented.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of August 14th, 2023. Are there any further discussion items or questions? Councilor Seymour?
Nope.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to public comment. The public comment portion of the meeting is an opportunity for the public to communicate with the City Council. Each participant will be given no more than 5 minutes on any topic they choose. Public comment is not intended to be a back and forth discussion. If there is a public hearing scheduled for the item which you wish to speak, please hold your comments and testify when that public hearing is called. Tonight, there is one public hearing for the Westminster's application for Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant. This evening, the city clerk has informed me that we have
We have one email, 4 live speakers, and 1 voicemail.
Thank you. Which will be played back after live speakers have concluded their remarks. City Clerk, would you please call our first person?
The first speaker is Alan Farb.
Welcome.
For tonight's post-city council meeting, you plan to discuss what you're calling reimagining boards and commissions. It sounds so innocent, but it's not. This council, with some of its members having already privately, perhaps publicly, expressing a real desire to dissolve certain, if not most or even all, citizen advisory boards and commissions, this council now wants to, and I quote, convert existing city advisory boards to ad hoc committees, allowing more flexibility to better serve the needs of the city council, and the public community council would set goals for each committee upon establishment and annual thereafter. Again, sounds so innocent, but it's not. Rather, to quote, better serve the community, which of course it is community members who comprise these boards on behalf of their fellow Westminster residents, and who serve to inform and advise this council, which of course helps keep this council, any council, grounded and connected to its diverse constituency. This council instead wants to control its population rather than to serve it. Westminster's citizen advisory boards also serve to act as an added and needed level of transparency, which supposedly is what this city purports to promote. To replace this city's diverse advisory boards with temporary targeted ad hoc committees solely to have what this council claims is needed to align with its strategic plan, this can easily lead to dictatorial role and council-managed information where Westminster is controlled not by its residents, but by persons both in this city and outside the city, interested only in their own gains, at the expense of the rest of us citizens. You've said it yourselves, and I quote, "Council would set goals for each committee, not the citizens. You would decide with your hand-picked people for your targeted projects and aims." You can say this change is needed because not enough residents volunteer for these boards. But then again, the Inclusivity Board, for example, of which I'm a member, and which a couple of you might prefer didn't exist, recently decided to reduce its number of members because the board felt it had an abundance of Westminster citizens on the board. You can also count your replacing citizens boards by saying, and I quote, "Advisory boards have often struggled with direction due to shifts in the needs of the city. But you know, sometimes these boards struggle because it's the city that handcuffs what its advisory boards are allowed to do in the name of our residents." And claiming this change better aligns with the City Council's strategic priorities, well, what about strategic priority 3, shared sense of community? Quote, "Foster equitable opportunities that help residents feel at home and connected in their community and empowered to live their lives." I think you've elected to skip this particular strategic priority. You really want to quash direct citizen input. I know that during council comments, you might have your embellished reasons to counter my words, but in this anti-resident, let's do away with citizen boards matter, why not transparently say to Westminster residents, "Thank you for your input, but we really don't care." You know, for special needed ad hoc committees, you can always create them for a specific purpose. Doing away with citizen advisory boards boils down to canceling citizen input, and it's just another power grab. So, what you're planning, it's really quite subversive. And it all sounds so innocent, but it's not. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Karen Calavity.
Welcome.
Hello. Hello, Karen Calavity, 9940 West Cliff Parkway. I was unaware of what Alan was talking about until he filled me in. But along those lines, I think there is a tendency here for exclusivity in the city council versus trying to meet the needs of the people. You know, I was in this partly on the study session there, and then had to close for executive session, another executive session with regard to censure, and we all know that's probably with regard to Bruce Baker, because Bruce Baker speaks up about things. I don't always agree with Bruce Baker, but Bruce Baker at least speaks up about things that are of public concern that should be out to the public, just as these boards represent the public. And there's this tendency more and more for the Westminster City Council to have an executive session meeting about this, an executive session meeting about that, and not allow people to even know what's going on, how their money is being spent, what decisions are being made. I want to talk about the municipal building. I know I attended the Sheridan Green event, and I do not agree with Bruce Baker that the Sheridan Green building should become a municipal building, but I believe the municipal building should use the existing structure and augment it with earth-friendly technology. I have no idea what the issuance of bonds is going to entail that's being voted on today, the second reading. And that's something, that municipal building didn't come to light until Bruce Baker brought it up. All this stuff is being done in secret, and it's not right. Those are my comments.
Thank you.
The next speaker is John Palmer.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to
talk to you folks this evening about Councilor's Bill number 40, the vacating of a portion of Shaw Boulevard. That street's been owned and maintained by the city for several decades, and now we're just going to give it away to the Uplands development? I repeat, give it away? That's not right. Let's talk about some things. That road was originally put in as a safety factor for the school buses to travel up and down because they were having a hard time negotiating 84th and Lowell. I live on Lowell. I see what happens on Shaw. Our fire department utilizes that truck or that street daily to get their big truck up and downhill, as opposed to going up to 84th and turning, or coming back and turning off 84th onto Lowell. I see numerous accidents that are going to occur there if we go ahead and do away with Shaw without any improvements made to Lowell Boulevard and 84th, as was promised by the contractor. So until that happens, I don't think we should vacate Shaw. I would like an actual traffic study of the number of cars on Shaw, both directions. Not just a peak hour, but a 24-hour cycle, a 48-hour cycle, because that peak hour doesn't mean anything. I live there, I see it daily. We need that before you make a decision. Again, the developer in the beginning was going to do all the infrastructure work first. To me, infrastructure is sidewalks, streets, sewer, water. Why are we vacating this when none of that is even taking place yet? I'm afraid that if you approve this, there's a potential we could end up with another Skyline Greens, another Holly Park, another Cottonwood Village, where they come in and start a project and something goes south, financing, the economy, whatever. Do we need another situation like that currently by giving away Shaw before they've got their sign off from CDOT that is still pending? They have not got a sign off from FEMA, which is still pending, or the Mile High Flood District, which is still pending, which all affect the A parcel of that property. So I'm asking that you please table this. Get the facts. Let's get a traffic study before you make judgment on giving this away. My other comment would be about the transparency factor of this. The neighborhood that I live in, I bet there are less than 10 people have a clue what's about to happen by losing Shaw Boulevard. And I'm serious about that. There's been no outreach to the community, now of any kind, to let them know what's going on or to possibly get some public input from them. Not once. I know it was part of the Uplands project, but I don't think everybody understood the scope of what was going to happen. This is something much more than that and needs to be heard. You need to hear it from the public. As well as, like I say, let's get an actual traffic study from the city, not from Uplands, and again, not one of their peak hours, because Shaw Boulevard, the diagonal, peak hours all day long. I sit on my porch, I see it. You know, this evening I was watching, out of 12 cars that came down the hill in a matter of 2 minutes, came across 84th, 10 of them came down Shaw. The next bunch of cars that came across 84th, there were 10 of them, 5 of them came down Shaw. You know, I could have sat there all night and counted. There's a lot of people that utilize Shaw, and not just that direction. There's a lot of people that come out of the unincorporated Adams County area behind me that are not Westminster residents that actually utilize that street to get out of the neighborhood. Now, I currently know the last traffic study the city did on Lowell was 6,500 cars a day. 6,500. How many of those vehicles access Shaw in one direction or the other? That's a question that needs to be answered before you pass this Councilor's Bill number 30, please. Or excuse me, Councilor's Bill number 40. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Tom Lampo.
Hello.
Welcome.
It's Good to be back in front of you. I'm here to invite God to be present here and to be with us in Westminster. I've started to hear reports of COVID or a variant or another name of some sort. TSA and the airline employees will soon be required to wear masks. Lionsgate recently imposed mask mandates for office personnel, but I hear those are ending. Morris Brown College has mask mandates for 2 weeks, and federal agencies are stating they will bring mask mandates back. I'm sure that sooner or later, our state, county, and city governments are going to start discussing mask mandates, restrictions, and lockdowns. Tonight I'm here to pray through that situation. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, in Jesus Christ's precious and holy name, I invite you here to be with us tonight throughout Westminster. Our community is yours. In 1 Chronicles 29:11 it states, "Yours, Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the majesty and the splendor, for everything in heaven and earth is yours. Yours, Lord, is the kingdom. You are exalted as head over all." Fear is beginning to creep into the national narrative again. A pestilence or sickness, pandemic, or whatever it might be called is starting to be spoken about. It's a weapon that is being used against us, and Isaiah 54:17 addresses this. It states, "No weapon forged against you will prevail." And we know who it comes from. John 10:10 tells us, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy." That's all it was before, and that's all it will be. A weapon to steal, kill, and destroy life. And we know that life is precious to you. And unfortunately, there are some who follow our enemy and want us fearful, because with fear, they can accomplish their agenda by stealing, killing, and destroying life. In Isaiah 41:10, you want us to know, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." We'll need strength if this materializes. We'll need your righteous right hand to protect us all. And to those that govern over us, please give them wisdom and reliance on you to overcome what our enemy has planned for us. You want trust in you, and with trust in you, Psalm 91:5-6 states, "You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday." It's all there for us to trust in you. Grant us the faith necessary for the trust. In your precious and holy name we pray. Amen. Please be considerate of our freedoms. Thank you.
Thank you.
Subsequently had to come in for justice to be served. Under former Chief Carlson, hello ladies and gentlemen and members of Westminster City Council, this is Charles Najar, 5940 West 94th. If you'll bear with me this evening, I have for you. So I wonder how many people remember our former police chief, Tim Carlson. Don't have all the time tonight to get into everything that he did, but let me touch on a few points. When one of his detectives forgot to file charges in a domestic violence case, Tony Kovaleski of Denver 7 came up in 2016 to ask the chief questions after a council meeting. Former Chief Carlson responded by running away like a scared child and screaming over his shoulder, "I am not dodging accountability." Under his command, Tim Carlson was also responsible for former Officer Curtis Argenbright raping a woman on duty and in uniform. And what most people don't know is the local justice system only sentenced the former Officer Argenbright to a misdemeanor charge and a 90-day sentence in the Broomfield County Jail. The FBI and the DOJ subsequently had to come in for justice to be served. Under former Chief Carlson, we lost hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money in use of forced settlements. And then, if to make it any worse, as you remember, Chief Carlson was responsible. An officer under his command filed a complaint with former city manager Don Tripp, which resulted in an investigation of the Westminster Police Department and former Chief Carlson and former city manager Don Tripp sneaking out the back door on a Thursday afternoon, retiring without having the courage or decency to face the voters, to face council members. And if you also recall, former city manager Tripp took $450,000 with him. That former investigation of former Chief Carlson cost our city $97,000 out of our general fund, ladies and gentlemen, for a report which we weren't allowed to see or read. So would it surprise you that there is a candidate currently running for city council who actually has the temerity to list former Chief Carlson as an endorsement? And would it surprise you, ladies and gentlemen, to know that the mayor pro tem, and Councilor Emmons actually endorsed this candidate? I'm not sure whether they think the voters are stupid, whether we have a bad short-term memory, or whether we don't remember what went on with former Mayor Atchison, former City Manager Tripp, former Chief Carlson. It was a bad time in the city of Westminster, and it was only 2 years ago. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I understand why people on the dais get so angry and furious and foam at the mouth when the past is discussed. And they say, we don't discuss the past, we only discuss the future here on Westminster. Well, that's because the past was never properly dealt with, ladies and gentlemen. There are several different slates running for city council, and I highly encourage everybody to be informed and know the issues. But also remember, the past is prologue if you don't ask questions. Thank you and have a great evening.
That was our last speaker.
Thank you. City Manager's report?
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, councilors. We'll move to the next slide with the update this week. And so, first of all, our city website, as I've mentioned several times previously, will get a new name, new extension, and that is starting on September 6th. Our new website address will be www.westminsterco.gov. That's the new name, and it will change from what it has been for some time. But the reason that the city is doing that is simply to move to a .gov domain, which provides increased security because that domain is hosted by the Department of Homeland Security. And that's a transition that's happening across the nation at the municipal level currently. What I will tell you is if you go to that old website, cityofwestminster.us, it will then take you to the website, so that one will remain active for some time moving forward. And so also with this transition, our email extensions will change, and so mine will be mfreitag@westminsterco.gov moving forward. But again, if you use my old address, it will certainly get forwarded to my new address. And so pretty much transparent for the community, but something that is important for us to do from a security standpoint. Next thing, as some of the council members mentioned during our pre-meeting and their council reports, but this past Thursday evening, we had the Sheridan Green Elementary School community meeting, and about 215 people attended. Very, very nicely attended, but great questions asked. And staff provided feedback that's been received over the past 2 months, talked through the due diligence that's been done to date with the school district, and starting to discover what the facility shape is mechanically, structurally, and then some initial concepts were shared with the folks that were in attendance. And if you still have input or feedback that you'd like to share with the city, you can certainly still do that. Our city webpage is open, so cityofwestminster.us/Sheridan Green, and you can go on there and provide feedback to us. But that process continues. If we stay on track, we'll be bringing back some of those initial concepts for further discussion with the council on September 25th. The 2023 Community Spirit Award, so nominations are currently open for this Spirit Award, recognizing businesses that make outstanding contributions in our community by supporting events, programs, or initiatives that certainly benefit the community and our residents. Businesses that exemplify dedication to uplifting the community will be recognized, and you can learn more at our City of Westminster Economic Development page, which is a little bit different, and so please take note. It's www.westminstereconomicdevelopment.org. But that's moving forward also. Next slide. Some Westie wins. If you've been driving around the community, you've seen these, but our Westminster's artistic traffic box wraps, the first 15 of those have been completed or are nearing completion. I've run into a couple of them around the community, and they look great. What a nice change of venue. And so the City Council recognized 53 student artists from 5 Westminster Public Schools for their art. And that's been used to create these vibrant, unique, beautiful traffic box wraps. And so look forward to seeing that program continue in years to come. We also hosted this past Wednesday the State of the City. So Mayor McNally and I provided a presentation to the Chamber of Commerce, the business and community leaders, on the latest city accomplishments, development updates, and public safety efforts. And then we also had a fireside chat with Chief Haubert, Deputy Chief Burke, the mayor, and I, and answered questions in real time from the audience members. And so that was a very nice event. I shared with the mayor earlier this evening. I've received lots of favorable comments, and folks were very pleased with that. And so look forward to continuing to work that in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. Next, the city receives an award for the Sheridan Underpass project, and you know that we did the ribbon cutting on that June 10th, and so the American Public Works Association, our Colorado chapter, has selected this project. It was a multimodal transportation improvement project as the best project in the transportation large community category, and so that's a huge win for Westminster. This project installed a 42-foot wide concrete arch underpass between Sheridan Boulevard, adjacent to the downtown Westminster, and widened Sheridan Boulevard to allow consistent 6 lanes of traffic with a center median. And oh, by the way, it connected the trail system, which allows you to ride your bikes between Denver and Boulder. So pretty cool, great accolades for our city, and I certainly appreciate the city staff's effort in bringing this to reality, and certainly the council's approvals over the years to make sure that this thing played out. And so it's a nice addition to our community. Next slide. Some things to know: Environmental Advisory Board meeting Wednesday, August 30th, 6:30 to 8 p.m. here at the city CMO conference room. That's upstairs, second level. Neighborhood Nights this Friday, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. in downtown Westminster. Just as a reminder, for Labor Day on Monday, city administrative offices are closed in observance of the holiday, and there will be no city council study session that night. Special Permits and License Board meeting Wednesday, September 6th, 7 to 8:30 p.m. City Council Chambers. Neighborhood Nights again Friday, September 8th, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. again in downtown Westminster. And then our next council meeting will be Monday, September 11th, 6:30 p.m. right here in council chambers. Next slide. No information only items tonight, and as we share with the community regularly, we certainly want to be accessible, responsive, transparent, and accountable. If you want to contact me, you can do so by calling the phone number listed, 658-2006. You can email me directly at mfreitag@cityofwestminster.us. You can follow us on X, like us on Facebook, check us out on Instagram, or ring our bell at Nextdoor. Pending any questions, that's all I have this evening.
Seeing none, thank you. That brings us to council comments. Anyone? Councilor Emmons?
Thank you. Just wanted to reiterate that I attended the Sheridan Green meeting, but also my purpose for speaking is to give a shout out to Andy and to Jake. I I came late from work, and I was towards the back, and there was a injured kiddo that was causing a small little scene, and they did very well trying to trying to tend to and care for this little kiddo. So just a shout out to them for going above and beyond. So thank you.
Counselor Baker?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to address the miscommunication that has occurred over the past couple months. That's the difficult part about really of the communications. A speaker can speak it, but a listener will hear what they thought they heard and not exactly what the speaker meant. And when that happens, you got to ask the speaker what he meant. Okay. And I've been asked to say what I meant when I was answering Mayor Pro Tem's request to have facts back up my extraordinary disappointment with bad information the council has received from time to time with a specific concrete incident. Okay? And I certainly thought I was providing him that information, but other listeners did not hear at all what I meant. Okay? As most of you know, I had been in the military, but this also applies in the business really community too. When you're the person in charge, you are responsible for everything that happens. And hopefully you've been given, the authority to take care of all those incidents. And you can delegate some of that, authority to your, the subordinates. But you can never delegate the responsibility. It's always yours. And what happens or what doesn't happen is still your responsibility. Which gets to the other thing in organizations. We need trust. We need absolute trust that we're getting the correct, the factual information. And mistakes and errors happen? Absolutely. But that's why the internal systems are supposed to correct those mistakes, are supposed to correct that bad information. And in the information in really question about access to Westcliff Park, we seem to have a reluctance to actually nail down what the facts were, which I find inexplicable. To me, the facts are the absolute most important part of the situation. And especially when we've been given other information that should put those facts we were given into doubt. The last part of this whole chain of events, I made a very drastic comparison, but I was not comparing individuals. I was not comparing personalities. I was comparing the facts of the incident. And that's been misinterpreted. And for that misinterpretation, I truly apologize. But that does not excuse the bad facts. Anyone who looks into the underlying facts of this will find nowhere, with one exception, the name of the city manager on it. And in the last, and to me, the most egregious, that did not come personally from the city manager. But we need to look at the facts, and we cannot ignore the facts. And if bad facts have been given, they must be corrected. And if this is an endemic problem within the city, it has to be addressed. So Manager Freitag, if you feel that I was comparing you to Richard Nixon, I was not at all. I was comparing the bad information that was given to council.
Anyone else? That brings us to the consent agenda. Counselor Emmons?
I move to adopt the consent agenda items 8A through 8B.
Counselor Seymour?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve items 8A and B. Is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Counselor Baker.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Demott.
Yes.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Counselor Azadi.
Yes.
Mayor McNally.
Yes.
Counselor Nermella.
Yes.
And Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
The motion passes on a 7-0 vote.
That brings us to item 10A. Do we have council discussion and possible action regarding a possible censure of a counselor? No? Counselor Azadi?
Thank you, Mayor. My comments tonight on this topic, I'd like to direct mainly to the employees of the city. You just heard our city councilor, who we are considering for this item to censure. That was his apology. That is not an apology. And I think we all heard it. You can come to your own conclusions. In my opinion, that is not an apology. That's not how you apologize to someone as a leader. And I want every single employee in this city to understand that Councilor Baker's comments to the city manager was wrong, that free speech in the Constitution does not cover you for defamation, that it's not a protected right. You can't just say anything you want, whenever you want, with no consequence. He called our city manager a liar. Not only was he wrong factually, but he was wrong ethically. And it's not right, and nor is it covered by the Constitution. So this is not a free speech issue to me. This is what kind of leadership do we want in the city? And what kind of leadership should we reflect? City council, we have 3 employees. City manager is one of our employees. And it was wrong for Councilor Baker to say what he did. Plain and simple. There was no way around it. There's no excuses we can make for him on his behalf. It's not right. And that's all I have to say. So we apologize.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Before I make comments, I actually would like to formally make a motion that we censure Councilor Baker.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Go ahead. Discussion.
I was hoping that we would have a different outcome here tonight, but I want to talk about a couple of things about why I think this is important. My colleague, in his comments, and I'll call it an attempt at what he feels he was doing, was an attempted apology. He mentioned trust. Trust is very important, and the reason that this isn't freedom of speech is we do have 3 employees, and if anybody knows who has an employee or who's an employee of an employer, you have certain rights as an employee to know that you're going to have a good work environment that is not hostile. When we publicly use defamatory language or cast a view that is defamatory over an employee, that is a problem as an employer. The council is the employer of the city manager, city attorney, and the municipal judge. That's very important for this body to take that as an employee relationship. And when it comes to trust, those employees should be able to trust that if we have that big of a disagreement, that it's going to be handled appropriately in the appropriate place, and we have adult conversations. I don't think that the 3 individuals who work for us don't understand that these jobs don't come with some criticism, but there's a time and a place for a conversation. The time and the place was not at the dais. I'm not going to argue facts versus fiction versus our recollection or our view on things that often are portrayed as facts that are perception. The fact of the matter is that did happen at the dais. We are the employer, and our employees deserve better than to be cast as dishonest at the dais from their employer. So with that being said, that is why I would be in favor of censuring Councilor Baker tonight.
Councilor Mellon?
I don't want to repeat anything that has already been said, but I do agree and would be in favor of censuring Councilor Baker. That was definitely not an apology. I think we all heard what was an impactful accusation to City Manager Freitag, and I think it goes beyond the city manager, right? It goes beyond to all the other staff who feel like they can't make a mistake in any information that they provide. And that's kind of a feeling of that you're living on the edge. And I don't want that all of our staff feel that way and that they feel afraid to pass on information that could be helpful or not to their to their manager and then on to us. So again, I apologize that we were at this point, but thanks.
Councilor Emmons?
Thank you. This is a First Amendment right for me. I know that when you get into an employer-employee scenario, however, there's guardrails around that. And as an employer, there's guardrails around as an employer as well as an employee and what principles that we follow. And with that, I appreciate your discussion every time you bring it forward. We have a right to our own opinions, each of us, even if they may be wrong. And calling names is something that I don't condone. And it was even at one point in time, I was called a name and you stood up for that. And you condone that as well and asked for an apology, of which it happened and we all moved on. Councilor Baker, that was not an apology in which I will be supporting the censure tonight.
Councilor Seymour?
Not any one of us is perfect, and I recognize that. I myself have made errors in judgment, and I admit that. And those, I hope, will be forgiven by those who need to forgive me. But when there is a ongoing, consistent pattern over years of accusatory language, calling people liars, corrupt, and then you bring that into the workplace. If I acted that way as an employer, I would have no employees. I think we have to have a different layer of care and duty to those who are in our stead. And because of that, and the history that goes along with that, I will be in favor of the censure this evening.
For me, the whole thing wraps around we are different because we are the employers, 7 of us. And when one person calls our staff, I cringe when the dishonest is used or liars are used. Even misrepresentation is used. Because, Councilor Baker, you ask great questions, but you don't always go for the crux of what you're looking for. you just come to the dais and say whatever you're going to say. And for our city manager to hear the word liar with his name associated, City Manager Freytag, I apologize. I don't know what I should have done that night. I think about it often. But tonight you hear 6 of us saying it wasn't right, we won't condone it, and I know I'll do something different if those words are used ever again from this dais while I'm here. To staff, the same as you've heard, I cringe when anyone up here states that you're dishonest, you aren't factual, or that you're lying to us. I don't feel that way for a split second. We've had conversations, we have pushed and pulled on each other and had great conversations. And we've had people stand before us with a question and say, yep, that's a mistake. And that's what I applaud about this staff. They do admit things happen. I certainly am not perfect. And when those things happen, a lie is an intent. And I don't believe that happens from you all. And so, and I know City Manager Freytag, you have never intended to lie to us. And so this is difficult tonight. I don't know if anybody's stomachs feels good tonight, but something needed to be said. And I'm sorry that we're at this for tonight. So do we need a roll call? Attorney Frankel?
You do need a roll call vote.
Roll call, please. And the motion is to move to censure Councilor Baker.
Mayor Pro Tem Demott.
Yes.
Councilor Emmons.
Yes.
Councilor Azadi.
Yes.
Mayor McNally.
Yes.
Councilor Nermella.
Yes.
Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
And Councilor Baker.
No.
The motion passes on a 6-1 vote.
That brings us to our public meeting. And I understand staff doesn't have any presentation.
No presentation this evening, Mayor.
So it is 7:52, and I will open the public hearing. And is there anybody that wants to speak?
We have one person signed up to speak, and that's John Palmer.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if I wanted to speak when the sign-up period was open, but I wanted to be sure and sign up so that I wasn't scolded for not signing up. So I don't have anything at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. See no one else signed up and wanting to speak, I will close the public hearing at 7:53. And is there a motion? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to authorize the mayor to execute a written certification in support of the city application for the 2023 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program.
Councilor Seymour?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item B3. Is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilor Emmons.
Yes.
Councilor Azadi.
Yes.
Mayor McNally.
Yes.
Councilor Nermella.
Yes.
Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
Councilor Baker.
Yes.
And Mayor Pro Tem Demott.
Yes.
The motion passes on a 7-0 vote.
That brings us to Councilor's Bill number 40. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to pass Councilor Bill number 40 on first reading, vacating a portion of Shaw Boulevard right-of-way within the Westminster Second Filing Subdivision.
Councilor Seymour.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to pass Councilor's Bill number 40. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Baker?
I would like to move to really of the table this thing because I think some good points were raised in public comment. What are we going to do about the left turns from Lowell going south onto 84th?
Councilor Emmons?
May I ask our deputy chief to answer a few questions about our fire truck and its access, because that came up in public comment? Or Chief Bernard, I didn't see you sitting there. I apologize.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and councilors. Thanks, Councilor Evans, for the question. So we do have a turning radius, and goes back to quite a ways back, as far as decades, for street design, and again, with the traffic engineering, their street designs. What we use specifically for our trucks is we have a turning template radius for our largest truck, and we use it for new developments and streetscapes, things of that nature, to ensure we can make those turns. Our newest aerial ladder trucks, our longest truck, is actually built with a rear steer component on it to help reduce those turning radiuses when we have those situations.
Okay, so it could make the turn.
Yes.
Okay,
Good.
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Namella, did you have something for Chief?
Not for the fire department. It was more for, I don't know if community development is here or not. Probably not. I saw in the staff report that there were issues with the safety with this current configuration with Shaw Boulevard, and that was one of the reasons why it was not, or it was recommended that we dedicate the right-of-way. So I had that question. I have another question, too, about it.
Mayor Pro Tem, councilors, Public Works and Utility Director Sarah Borgers is here and could certainly answer questions related to this vacation.
Absolutely. Sarah Borgers, Interim Public Works and Utilities Director. What we are seeing on Shaw Boulevard is people cutting through Shaw Boulevard in order to circumvent the light there at 84th and Lowell. We've gotten complaints about speeding on Shaw and a number of complaints about folks trying to bypass and go around. So that's one of the primary safety reasons that staff has shared.
Can you speak to the timing of, so if it's vacated, what's the timing of when Shaw Boulevard would be kind of removed from service, and there's a much more robust grid that will go in place of this one little connection. So I'm just kind of curious as to when that little piece is taken away versus the timing of when we'll have some streets kind of close by.
Absolutely. So for right now, if council approves this tonight, we're prepared to block that street off, but we won't do that until we've had an opportunity to communicate with some of the neighbors to make sure they're fully aware of what is happening in that area. So once that communication's done, we're prepared. You'll see concrete dividers go up to clearly define that that is no longer a public right-of-way.
And we did a traffic analysis of this area before, I'm assuming with the Master ODP, but I'm assuming that was including the new street grid that would be in place.
Yes, so this was approved as a part of the vacation wasn't approved, but the overall plan was approved with the MODP and include all of the traffic studies internal to that site once it's finally constructed.
Excuse me. This is not your time to speak. Go ahead.
With respect to closing it off now, I understand there's safety concerns, but the public speaker also asked about just what are the traffic impacts of without having the other streets sort of in place to replace the movement along Shaw?
So there's no new traffic that will happen until such time as there's something built on the site, and so that's all already included in those streets when we modeled that.
So, but the existing traffic that goes down Shaw and the existing demand for the use?
It'll push to 84th and Lowell to that intersection right there.
Are we going to be evaluating the signal timing and any impacts to just the ease of traffic flow with taking that out?
Ask an excellent question that I will look into.
Okay. And I was just curious on when it said that we didn't have any record of a dedication of the street to the city. Do we actually have title work for it, or what is that?
So it's it's kind of funny, my previous life as a ditch company, you have these certain rights after you've been in a certain location for a while. It's very similar to that. We have a right just by virtue of having been there for a while. So we don't have title to it. We've been maintaining it for at least 20 years. It's been there for, I would suspect, far longer than that. But we actually don't have any paperwork saying that it's our right-of-way.
Okay. I would just ask that we be cognizant of any impacts with removing the road and that we have some measures in place to look at how we ensure that traffic flow is still moving through there so we don't have any more upset, people running red lights versus cutting through.
I think that's a very great point, and we will definitely look into it.
Okay.
While you're still up there,
Sure.
I'll jump in. We've heard this several times over the last few months. CDOT, FEMA, and Mile High Flood District, have we heard from anybody? Do we know when we're going to hear from them?
So I know that there's ongoing conversations for this particular action. Those approvals are not needed for this action, but certainly approvals will be needed before construction starts and impacts those different entities.
Perfect, thanks. Whose light did I see? Oh, okay, thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
A table motion is on the table. Do we need to vote on that first?
That motion would need to be seconded first.
Do I have a second for tabling? I don't see one, so we're back to the motion. Is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Counselor Azadi.
Yes.
Mayor McNally.
Yes.
Counselor Nermella.
Yes.
Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Counselor Baker.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Demott.
Yes.
And Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
The motion passes on a 6-1 vote.
That brings us to yeah, but we had 2 Cs, so I was just making sure they were right. That brings us to item, let me just see our number, 10D. Counselor Seymour?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move, based on recommendation of the city manager, to determine that the public interest will be best served by authorizing a sole source purchase from Qmation Inc. in the amount not to exceed $105,000 annually for Avia system platform software for the 3-year period from 2023 to 2025 for a total cost not to exceed $315,000 for the 3-year period.
Counselor Emmons?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to pass item 10D. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Seymour?
Nope.
Counselor Baker?
Yes, and this is the system we've been running our water system on for 20 years?
Yeah, I'm going to ask our interim Public Works and Utilities Director to answer that since that's before my time.
Counselor Baker, I'm afraid that's before my time as well. I know it's been at least 10 years, and you're correct. Our entire water, drinking water, wastewater systems, and all of the satellite facilities are all run with that platform.
It's done a very good job.
It has.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Roll call, please.
Mayor McNally.
Yes.
Counselor Nermella.
Yes.
Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Counselor Baker.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Demott.
Yes.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
And Counselor Azadi.
Yes.
The motion passes on a 7-0 vote.
That brings us to item 10E. Counselor Emmons?
I move to authorize the mayor to sign the amended and restated computer-assisted dispatch exchange system agreement. That is an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Thornton, the city and county of Broomfield, the Adams County Communications Center, and the city of Westminster.
Counselor Seymour?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Counselor Nermella.
Yes.
Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Counselor Nermella, could you state that again? I just didn't. Yes. Okay, thank you. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Counselor Baker.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Demott.
Yes.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Counselor Azadi.
Yes.
And Mayor McNally.
Yes.
The motion passes on a 7-0 vote.
That brings us to item 10F. Counselor Emmons?
I move based on the recommendation of the city manager to determine that the public interest would be best served by ratifying sole source vendor purchases made in 2023 with Injury Care Associates not to exceed $70,000. Authorize sole vendor status to Injury Care Associates for 2024, 2025, and 2026, and authorize associated expenditures in the amount not to exceed $75,000 per year for the years 2024, 2025, and 2026, subject to annual appropriation.
Counselor Seymour?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to pass item 10F. Is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Counselor Baker.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Demott.
Yes.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Counselor Azadi.
Yes.
Mayor McNally.
Yes.
And Counselor Nermella.
Yes.
The motion passes on a 7-0 vote.
That brings us to item 11A, Counselor's Bill number 36. Counselor Seymour?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to pass Councilor's Bill number 36 on second reading, providing for a supplemental appropriation of funds to the 2023 budget of the Community Development Block Grant Fund.
Counselor Emmons?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to pass Counselor's Bill number 36. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Baker?
Yes, I will be voting against this for, well, the same reasons I voted against it on first reading.
Roll call, please.
Counselor Baker.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Demott.
Yes.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Counselor Azadi.
Yes.
Mayor McNally.
Yes.
Counselor Nermella.
Yes.
And Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
The motion passes on a 6-1 vote.
That brings us to Counselor's Bill number 38. Counselor Seymour?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to pass Councilor's Bill number 38 on second reading, authorizing the issuance of tax-exempt certificates of participation, Series 2023, in a par amount not to exceed $37.1 million for the construction of a replacement municipal court facility and related COP issuance costs.
Counselor Emmons?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to pass Counselor's Bill number 38. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Baker?
Yes, again, I will be voting against this because the only reason I see we're using this funding mechanism is to exclude the voters from a decision about long-term debt. And I don't think we should do that. I think that is terrible.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I just had a question for staff. It was insinuated during public comment that this has kind of happened in a vacuum behind closed doors. I feel like we've had quite a few public meetings about this process. Can you maybe go through roughly when we first started talking about that and roughly how many times we've had a presentation on this topic?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Larry Dorr, Chief Financial Officer and Deputy City Manager. Starting in December, this City Council had a presentation from facilities staff. Prior to that, had a visit to the municipal court facilities, all of the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and councilors. This was a public meeting at our municipal courts facility. And then following that, received a presentation with a financial plan to subsequently make the replacement of the court an actual reality for the community. Wanted to just have those on record as was stated on August 14th in further detail, as is described in the staff's memorandum that is present on the city's website. I also want to just point out that legally speaking, the city's special counsel does not describe this as long-term debt of the city, just to have that factually corrected in the record, sir. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that because I know that I've heard that insinuation a couple times recent weeks, so being accurate on the record I think is important. But also, I'm going to continue to support this. This is a big need, access to justice that is safe, and therefore both our employees and our community is really important. This is a long time in the making, so I'm glad that we get to do the second vote on this and move forward.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Demott.
Yes.
Counselor Emmons.
Yes.
Counselor Azadi.
Yes.
Mayor McNally.
Yes.
Counselor Nermella.
Yes.
Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
And Counselor Baker.
No.
The motion passes on a 6-1 vote.
It's now 8:09, and we will move into post-session meeting. And we have one presentation there, followed by an executive session before we adjourn. So we will take a break and meet in the other room. Okay.
Okay.
We're in post meeting, it's 8:19, and our first presentation, and only one.
Yes. And Mayor, this is really step two. We had provided some information to you several months ago about boards and commissions, and is there a better way? Is there a different way? Is there a more appropriate way? Not sure, and so I'd asked city clerk to do a little research, see what options are out there, other ideas, and so that's what we're here to share with you this evening. Okay, so
Welcome.
city clerk.
Good
Fitch.
evening, council. I'm Abby Fitch, City Clerk. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present this evening on boards and commissions. Tonight, I'm seeking direction on 2 recommendations. And let me give you a little background. In recent years, the volunteers of boards and commissions have decreased, making it difficult to have a deep applicant pool for the vacancies we have. This problem is not unique to Westminster. I spoke to surrounding communities, and they are facing the same sort of challenges. So in speaking with boards and commissions members, it seems that these challenges are largely around 2 issues. The first one being around recruitment. We do our recruitment in November and December, and that's a busy time of year for people. It's the holiday season, people are traveling, there's school breaks and all of those type of things. And then the second reason we seem to have turnover and vacancy is that the advisory boards often get frustrated in trying to find projects that fit within their board's purpose, their wide purpose, and still align with the city's rules and also strategic plan and council and the city's vision. So we've tried to address these in different ways. First, the recruiting, we have reached out through all our channels. We reach out, we send targeted emails to people who have been involved in the city in the past, like our Civic Academy graduates, people who have volunteered in other capacities. We also use our social media far and wide, and of course our website. And then the other, and then we also have an onboarding. So we use this time to teach them how to have an open meeting, follow the rules, and then we try to guide them on appropriate goals. But it's still, these 2 challenges still are coming up. So in early 2023, we developed a strategic objective under the strategic priority of sense of community, and they included KPIs that were to evaluate the current boards and commissions to determine if the structure aligns with the city needs and streamline the recruitment process to attract more applicants. So staff took a holistic view of the boards and commissions. We called surrounding communities, talked about their challenges, and we also talked about what our boards and commissions wanted to do. So out of these discussions and other experiences learned, we came up with, instead of having advisory boards, we would convert these to ad hoc committees. These committees would be much more targeted towards specific goals. For example, if city council decided that the city needed more playgrounds, we could gather a group of individuals who are interested in parks and rec and have them evaluate whether or not we need more playgrounds. And then they could come back to council with a recommendation of that sort. It would be easier for them to align with the strategic priorities as well as keep them focused and give them a very big job to do. So this would also give the opportunity to expand the volunteer pool as opposed to contract it, because you could serve on many ad hoc committees over the years, and an individual could look at all their different interests and not just be focused on one. Now, as far as the recommendation on recruiting, we would like to convert to an ongoing recruiting process, and we understand that that could be terribly time-consuming for city council. So we recommend that we conduct video interviews. An individual would be given 3 or 4 or 2 or however many questions council determines, and they'd be standardized. And the person would record a video, and council could watch them at their leisure or determine a proper forum to do that in, and then make their appointments that way. So with these two recommendations, it would give these boards and commissions more finite and tight guardrails in order to accomplish more and utilize their talents further. I think that that's about it. Do you have any questions?
I can tell you've been talking to people because I've, in meeting with the Jeffco folks and the Adams folks, I've heard exactly what you said. And honestly, back in, I can't remember when we got rid of transportation, I was liaison to that group, and we were losing people left and right, kept getting people in, but we had fulfilled, fast tracks had passed, everything was moving, and they just didn't have any projects, so they agreed they really shouldn't be in motion anymore, so they debunked themselves. And, you know, we used to have Parks and Rec, we had libraries, and we've moved them together. So things do change, and I certainly heard the comments from the citizens tonight, but it's always evolving. And I know Broomfield's one that they just were spending so much time with interviewing, you know, a handful, and then they'd need people again. And so they've gone to the video, and Guyleen, the Mayor Castriatis, says it's worked well because they can do it. If she's up at 1 in the morning and can't sleep, she can go look at some interviews. So it's working for them, and so I just thank you for all of your work, and I have been, whether it was during the city manager's search or whatnot, people come up to you and just share why they're no longer on the environmental board, why they quit this, why they quit that, and it's for everything that you said. They had no purpose, and they want to belong to something they have a purpose for. So it's probably too bad we don't do exit interviews or have something to really sort of know some of that, but they have come to probably all of us and shared some of their concerns. So others, yeah, Councilor Navarro?
I have about 9,000 questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
So can you tell me what other communities are switching out to ad hoc committees versus advisory boards?
So no one has exactly done this model yet. So we have a couple communities, Boulder being one of them, and maybe Lafayette, who are hiring a consultant to look at how to move their advisory boards forward. Lakewood moved to one big advisory committee, which we had long discussions about initially because we thought, well, maybe we can do that, just have a big advisory committee. But that led to some other issues, that there started to be subcommittees, and then open meetings laws, that they had issues with that. And so after those discussions, we decided doing things that had a finite time period would give people a chance to be really focused, work on a project that they really were invested in, and then once they were done with that project, they could move on to the next one. It is not our intention to at all discourage volunteers. We love our volunteers, but to actually give them opportunities that are meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that people have to feel like the mayor mentioning, you know, the transportation committee is like, well, not much left for us to do. I know some of our groups have certainly struggled. I was on the environmental advisory board, kind of wondering what the role was. But I also think that we could be using our advisory boards as advisory boards versus them doing little projects like they're kids at school at a table expected to do a project. I feel like they could be used to participate in our planning processes, whether that's something for public works or something for community development or parks and rec, and actually weigh in and provide guidance on larger projects. Like right now, we're going to be doing a housing strategy. So how might diversity, the DEI group, inclusivity board, fold into helping to advise on a plan like that. And it could also, the Parks and Rec group could also weigh in on that. So I think it's the lack of feeling like there's a purpose and lack of understanding what to do has also obviously impacted people wanting to be on these boards. I'm hearing you talk about, the recruitment timing is a bad time. Well, why don't we just change the time of the recruitment? One of the other things I've heard from folks is that it's difficult to meet in person. It is, especially now when we're all juggling 9,000 things. So why couldn't we set a standard for more hybrid or virtual options to get more people engaged? This is kind of the new world. Let's live in it. And let's attract people in a more inclusive way to participate. So I also am concerned about when we lose these advisory boards, we do lose history. I don't know exactly, if it's like our historic advisory board, if that stays because it has more of a function. But we do lose history and knowledge about what we've been trying to do as a community, whether it's certain open spaces that we've been trying to get or obtain, or certain trail connections that we've been working towards. And so here's the deal, like if we need to look at it a little more closely. We can't, I don't think just saying we're going to flip entirely over to these, sorry, what is it called again? I'm sorry. Ad hoc committees is the right direction. I am actually very intrigued by the other communities that are taking a minute to look at what's most effective and setting up, hopefully, some parameters around, well, when would you use an ad hoc committee? And when would you want to have an advisory board? And then setting up some standards of care for the city to say, if we're going to have an advisory board, this is what we need to bring to them. And this is the direction and or the advisory capacity of this board that we want to obtain. Just clear parameters for both. And I could see us having a combination. But I wouldn't suggest doing it now. I do like your other idea of how we would do the interviews.
So can I address a couple of those points? So first, when we've done mid-year recruitments, the applicant pool has not been much deeper. We have to fill a vacancy within 45 days. And so when we do have vacancies and we don't have a wait list, we do open and we always have to extend the deadline. So we have not found the right time of year to do the recruitment, and maybe we haven't hit the right time of year, but mid-year recruitments have also had the same sort of thing. The idea behind having the ad hoc committee versus a general advisory board is really more just to focus the purpose. So I definitely want to give them more care. That's a great way to put it. Give them more care, and I want them to be able to advise in a meaningful way. And so when we discussed this, like I said, there was a discussion of having a very large advisory board and using them in that way. But unless time is really invested, those boards still end up with the same issue. And the surrounding communities there are a couple of communities that are hiring a consultant. We were just trying not to do that because of the expense.
Well, we could also wait and read what their reports say, because potentially it'll be something rather similar. And I would be more interested to have more data behind it, and more of an understanding of, okay, if a community has gone this direction, how has it impacted them? We do have a pretty robust communications team, and part of communications is the transparency, the inclusion of people, working to make sure people are integrated into what we're doing as a community. And so I feel like just giving people projects to do on an ad hoc basis is not really truly asking for a function of hearing what would they do in, for specific our planning efforts and our is it CIP that they're, looking at and commenting on? Is it just, it's like thinking about where do we get community input on what? What should we be getting community input on? And focus our advisory boards around that. Okay, thanks.
Counselor Emmons?
I have a list of questions as well. So what keeps us from having ad hoc committees right now?
Our code. So in the code,
Should
with the
remember that.
exception of the election commission, which lives in the charter.
Right, and the historic landmark board is in
Yeah,
that
and the
ordinance.
quasi judicial boards are not part of this.
Right.
They're part of the recruiting discussion, but they're not part of this discussion because they make decisions on behalf of the city. And historic landmark board is one of those.
Okay. So if we were to move to an ad hoc, kind of dovetailing off your question or point, what would trigger an ad hoc to be created?
I think that there are several things, mostly if we know the housing study, that I'm gonna take Councilor Nermella's example, because I think that that's an excellent example. We know that the housing study is coming and council would like a look at it through the lens of DEI. That would be a perfect ad hoc committee. They could look at that, give community input, and come back and advise council on that.
Okay. Would there be a limit to the number of ad hocs that we'd have? I would presume it would be terrible if we had 20 for staff to.
We did discuss that, but we did not come to a conclusion on that. So, yeah, I would imagine at some point we would want to put on some limit, and that would need further discussion.
Okay. And I don't know if you've looked this far into it, but would there be an expiration of members that we currently have in place? I know you said that they can move from ad hoc to ad hoc, but would there be an expiration of time that their service would be?
Currently, I would say no, because term limits are coming up for the first time, and that is going to be a problem when we lose a good portion of our board members because the term limits have come up. Now, just like currently, council could choose not to reappoint someone to a different committee, or if there were extreme circumstances, they could possibly remove somebody. But we have not really looked at terms, and as we recruit, we could always council could always choose not to appoint someone to another committee.
Okay. I know the approach is to have a video interview, but I personally am of an older mindset as far as I feel like there's a human touch, a human approach to meeting people in person. Not everybody has the ability for video or to record or know how to. It just age ranges and everything, resources that our residents have. So my one concern would be that is just to have that as one option. I've always liked the in-person approach because that's what helps build a community. It's how you get in the community to give advice and give thoughts to council. And so my approach would still be to be an interview and not video if we decide to move to an ad hoc process. But I would say that at this point, I'm against the video option as an interview.
I do want to say that we also discussed people who may not have the technology to record a video, which doesn't address your human interaction, totally understand that, but we would allow them to record a video in our office. It's simple enough to sit them up and, start a Teams message and have them record it right in our office, so we would offer that as a service as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Counselor Azadi?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, thank you for the presentation. I think it's always good to reimagine every process that we have. I'm certainly not in favor of changing boards to ad hoc committees for a few reasons. I think Councilor Lamella said it best with the fact that our current advisory boards aren't really used as advisory boards, right? I think we could take a scalpel to this problem rather than the sledgehammer of completely changing, because I think there's steps, and like you said, there are other municipalities are looking at this. The reason why they haven't went into the extreme of just changing is because I think they see the same risks that we're talking about here, which is a risk of lack of civic engagement. Number one, a lot of folks reach out and say, hey, I just had someone this last weekend say, hey, I'm thinking of joining a environmental board. Do you have something like that in the city? I said, yeah. You haven't, and I inquired as to why that person hasn't heard of this, because they're very engaged, right? They watch city council meetings. I think this problem comes down to a few things. It sounds like the real issue is recruitment. And to fix recruitment, I don't think requires changing the entire paradigm of how we do boards and commissions. Because again, that can risk lack of trust in us, right? Folks who are there currently and folks who know of it or have been on it in the past, so all the alumni and the folks who are thinking of coming on it, they want to know that we care enough to have an advisory board, right? But to Councilor Nomella's point, let's change how we use them. They're currently used as they're kind of on the side doing a few projects once in a while, right? That probably is the main issue, is when you spend time, when you tell someone, hey, we're going to interview you, they come, we all interview, so we ask questions, but then they start with their role on a board, and then they realize, oh, this is just busy work. I mean, most of it, because we're not using them in the advisory capacity that they could be used for. So I think that's one change that we could make. From a recruitment standpoint, I like the idea of changing it to ongoing throughout the year, and maybe we get rid of the requirement that all 7 of us need to always be there. I mean, if it becomes, or we can change so we can all kind of schedule time separately, so we don't have to be there together interviewing one person. We could all interview them over a period of time. We all pick a date that works for us, and but there's ways of changing how we interview. I don't think video is a reason why we're not getting folks. That's not a hurdle or a resistance point. So I'm with Councilor Emmons on the personal still matters, because it shows that we are taking our time to interview them and we value their time. So I'm a fan of the personal. I like Mayor McNally's point on exit interviews. I think we should start doing exit interviews. Then we can gather data over time and find out why people are leaving, right? It's conjecture. We all hear things from people who have been on boards, but until we have enough data to justify the reasoning, we shouldn't change the whole way we do it just because we hear some people telling us some things sometimes. And I love the idea of flexibility. So someone said it, of having a member on multiple boards. So being able to float across boards. So rather than us recruiting one person for one, can't we recruit one person to be on our board, any board that they choose, and they can kind of hop around? That's kind of interesting to me, because people's preferences change over time. They may be interested in something else over time, but they're locked in one board and they don't want to be in that board anymore. So give them the flexibility of moving around to different boards. And finally, I think some of our boards, so I'm the Human Services, and we meet a few times a year. It's an advisory board, but some other boards meet multiple, once a month and so forth. If we have a problem with folks leaving boards, just change the frequency of meetings for some of them, right? So these are just like scalpel measures that we can take rather than us just taking a sledgehammer and saying, oh, no more. So that's my thoughts.
Councilor Baker.
Yeah, if we could get a little more specific. The planning board is always going to be here, right?
Correct.
And basically special permits and license is always going to be here, right?
Correct.
Okay, and the election and the personnel boards are mandated by charter, aren't they?
They are.
Okay, so we're not going to be changing any of those.
That's true. I wrote in the memo that this would just be the advisory boards. The quasi-judicial boards would not be touched in this process.
And so the advisory boards are the PRNL, the environmental, the diversity, the human services, anything else?
I'll get it wrong if I can do it off the cuff. The election commission is an advisory board, but it is in the charter, so that would require a vote of the people. The rest of the advisory boards are environmental advisory board, human services, the inclusivity board, and the open space and the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Advisory Board.
Okay, great. Because for me, I think it has to do with work product the boards produce, because you want to spend your time doing something productive. So planning and special permits do that all the time. They always have a reward. Elections, personnel, and history, they understand if we don't have a personnel problem, they're going to meet and say it was a great year and move on. So they have perfect expectations for what their work product will be. But the other four, have they ever delivered work product that then was passed on to council and acted on? I mean, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on that we don't see on the council. But I can't think of any work product that came from these four boards, except Human Services. Don't they spend money?
Yes, Human Services Board gives grants each year, and those are presented to council for approval.
Right. But on the other three, have they had a worked product that was sent up and acted on by council?
Not in the time that I've been clerk. I don't want to say for sure. They've had Inclusivity Board and Environmental Board have both presented or asked for proclamations. They do try to, not exactly how you're asking.
Counselor, if I could just use an example, so the two park renamings both went before the Parks, Rec, and Open Space Board, and the Inclusivity Board reviewed them. They weren't separate standalone work projects that they had, but they were, requests that came into the city, staff reviewed it, and then took them through those boards to get their recommendations before they came to the council for approval. But that's
And
one
the
that
one
just...
was really recommended by the board, but the other was not?
Correct.
That does remind me. And during strategic plan, they utilize those boards a lot for input during during the comp plan. They utilize those boards a lot for feedback.
Gotcha, okay. Because I think that, well, the value of your effort is going to be a big, really determiner if you're going to spend more time doing it. But if you just think your efforts are not really productive, then it's going to be really hard to get. So I sort of like your task force thing for those areas and boards for the other.
I'll just comment on that too, as the liaison to Parks, Rec, Library, and Open Space. That's a pretty cohesive group because they have a budget, and so they do community grants and community updates. They spend a lot of time reviewing those. Actually, they spend a lot of time trying to get people to apply for those and do the communications on that and then the budget. And now they're using that budget for Emerald Ash Borer grants as well. So that gives them a little better sense of purpose. So because at the end of the day, they can say, we've done X,
something.
Y, and Z, and we've, spent this much money and done that too. So, so that's a little, that helps, and I think that's probably why that group doesn't have much turnover either.
That's very true,
Yeah,
yes.
and their meetings are very full. But
Attorney Frank?
One question, does the Open Space Board also get involved when we apply for grant funding for open space acquisition?
They, history, before I was on there, I know that they worked to develop, a target list of potential open space, and they had a priority on that. But not so much on the last couple acquisitions that came up, and we had an opportunity to purchase those, so they didn't have time to circle back to them on that. I think they're happy that we bought those, very much so, but, they do have a pecking order that's in their minutes, so.
Thanks.
Counselor Baker, anything else? Counselor Seymour?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I think it's important Counselor Baker hit it on the head. If you're productive and you have an end in mind, you know, you feel like you've had a fulfillment from that standpoint. So I'd like to see us put something in our code that allows ad hoc. I think we're gonna have a potential for an ad hoc committee if the wards passes. I think we're gonna have a great deal of need for that, so I think we should be proactive in that and addressing our code from that standpoint. And that may be come up, if it passes, it'll be a good experiment on how ad hoc has, you know, a beginning, a middle, and an end. But I do think, I think too, if we have some ad hoc committees that we can develop, it might help our recruitment too, is because we can say, hey, this is what we're looking for, and here's your time commitment. Not this kind of nebulous, you meet here and there, and, you know, versus the quasi-judicial that have a very set schedule too. So I think having an ad hoc available to us as a tool would be a good start, and then we can see where we evolve from there.
Mayor Pro Tem?
One, thanks for the work. I think that some of this spurred off of some of my questions during planning, because I have 50% of those 4 boards, and they're the ones that meet monthly. I know yours meets monthly as well. I see them struggle. I mean, they struggle to have a sense of purpose in what they're doing. They're oftentimes spend their meeting figuring out what they should be doing. And so I remember one of my asks was, you know, let's task them with something, then let's, you know, give them part of the strategic plan and say, you know, do this. So with, you know, we've heard a lot of different conversation here. I think that's the bigger challenge than anything. I mean, aside from the recruitment piece, I mean, there's almost 2 separate issues, really. The other part that I didn't hear you hone in on too much, and I hate to put staff on the spot, but I mean, these boards take a lot of staff time, from my understanding. And so, you know, if we're trying to navigate and make sure that these boards are playing within the sandbox legally they should be playing in, on top of them trying to figure out what they can do, like, what does that look like from a staff perspective? How does staff feel that this model would help them better in terms of time and being able to recommend things that are productive for us to get community input? Because I do think, you know, staff often is looking to us for direction, you know, and I think it would be helpful to say, here are things that from a staff perspective we would like community input beyond council. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, I actually think that it would help with staff time, just because staff then would be able to stay focused and be able to keep their group of volunteers towards a specific aim, rather than trying to help them figure out where they fit in or what they should be doing.
I mean, from my perspective, and this is just my view of it, and I've sat through a lot of meetings, you know, even before having these ones as a liaison, because I've had the environmental advisory and inclusivity probably for, I guess, last year and a half or so, maybe a little bit longer than that. I feel like a lot of the times where they really get into conflict, if they had direction, it's around that you have very passionate people who care very much about certain topics, and those without direction ends up coming in the conversation, and it's not always agreed upon. And so, you know, they spend a lot of their time in conflict. Not that conflict is necessarily bad, but it'd be nice if that energy was directed at a task where they can actually complete something. And I think that's where they get frustrated. I mean, we even heard it, as much as it was critical of this process, we heard it tonight in the comments, that they feel handcuffed. And I don't think that that's at all the purpose. I mean, you know, the speaker tonight was just appointed by this very council. So, you know, we want diversity of thought. We want, in my view, and I assume my colleagues want that too, but there's got to be some purpose. Otherwise, you know, people are going to get frustrated. Staff's going to spend a lot of time. And to Councilor Baker's point, what are we producing? So, I mean, I don't know what the right model is. I'm open to us looking at it and saying, let's change some of these, or, you know, figure out how we do. Like maybe you even take the groups that are there now and say, you know, this year we're gonna give you these 2 specific projects, and maybe the meeting times change and they work on those projects. But I mean, how many, and maybe you don't know on Environmental Advisory Board, but like how many subcommittees do these, you know, 2 groups spin off into? So we didn't even talk about that. I know it happens in IB all the time.
I don't have specific numbers on that, but yes, some of the advisory boards do spin off into subcommittees, which sometimes it's to make decision-making faster. So it really isn't about getting work done. So it's a little different scenario there, but it does happen.
Well, and I mean, I guess that's the other thing where I really wanted to, when we started talking about this a while ago, hone in on it. Like even some of the subcommittees, like in inclusivity, it seems like they were kind of placeholders, and it was something somebody was running with at one time, and it just kind of fizzled out. And it was a placeholder on the agenda that they would bring up every meeting until finally, well, I think some of them, the board members left the board. And so then they finally were like, well, we should remove that because the board member's not even on the board anymore. So, you know, I think with the amount of residents that we get, having opportunities that we know we're gonna task them with something they can actually go after and complete something seems like it's a better use of the citizens' time, I guess is part of what I'm concerned with. But I'm open to hearing what my colleagues think about that, because I think that that's the challenge, in my view.
Counselor Emmons?
May I ask what the difference is between ad hoc and task force? Because I'm trying to differentiate how the Stanley Lake Task Force is different than this ad hoc. Like it's a one-off, right? Like we asked for.
Yeah, I have been using those words interchangeably. Maybe City Attorney Frankel has some thoughts on this, because it was the City Attorney's Office that gave me some advice that we should be calling these ad hoc committees as opposed to task force committees.
I think in the past, task forces have had a broader membership. If an ad hoc committee is intended to be like a board or commission, I think we have specific requirements for membership. So it probably would be a smaller group. So maybe ad hoc committee is intended to reflect more like the membership of our boards and commissions currently.
Thank you. The other thing we specifically talked about was having definite timelines. So, you know, we would have a start date and an end date, and of course you would be allowed to renew those whenever it was necessary, or just because you liked the work they were doing. But that way it would not just be something that it would not be changing just the name of an advisory board to ad hoc. No purpose.
To answer your question of what you're charging us with tonight, I'd be for moving to ad hoc, just because I think to the mayor's point, we've seen Westminster evolve and change, and we've needed these one-offs before, and these committees to give council feedback, and I think they're poignant, they're direct, they have a mission, they have a goal as far as what they're working on. So I would be in favor of moving to an ad hoc instead of just advisory, because I think even quasi-judicial boards, mine, Historic Landmark Board, a couple members, some members have the same concerns as far as, well, we don't feel we have a purpose. We don't feel that we have direction. And so I think they're trying to kind of create that direction, create that purpose. And I think that's partly where we've come to today, is at a head to figure out, okay, what's our boards and commissions purpose, and how does that align with our strategic plan? Obviously that changes with council direction, but I'd be in favor of evolving into a benefit for our community members, because I feel like they would have a greater, not that they don't have purpose, but like I feel like they would have a greater voice as far as like hot topic items that we counsel. One of them was thinking the ward. We could have started that discussion even prior to getting it on the ballot. Like, thoughts on this? And then that group could tell us, we kind of get their pulse, like they're out in the community, we can kind of get their pulse. So I feel like it would be, I'd be willing to move to that direction, except for the video.
I wrote it down.
Like Councilor Seymour said, I would love to see us have the tool. But I would definitely want to have some strong, again, reasons and parameters over what's an advisory board, what's the use of it, and versus what's an ad hoc. When do you call one up? And I guess I'm more concerned over boards that seem to have a timeless advisory function, like the inclusivity board. There's always something. So I wouldn't, I'd really want to have a strong understanding of why a board would be transitioned into an ad hoc.
So the idea behind this, I have written that down. I do think that I will very much look at that. The idea behind this would be, though, that we would take those individuals and make sure that we capture that they have an interest in inclusivity or DEI or whatever their interest is. And every single time one of those issues came up, they would be appointed to work on that task.
Yeah,
So-
I think there's a certain point where we just want continued advice over something. And like the Parks and Rec Board, like they've been continuously active and engaged, and I would say the Inclusivity Board similarly. While sometimes they may struggle with like what their specific project is, or if they think they need a project, but maybe they just don't. If there's nothing on the agenda, don't meet. If there's not something, and it goes back to what Councilor Azadi was saying, like let's have some clarity in focus around what is it we want the advisory boards to do. If we don't ask them to meet every single time, every month, then they still have the purpose. They're always there to be called up. I don't feel like, oh yeah, remember that one guy that was on the, interested in inclusivity? Let's get him on the task force. I don't think that's like the way to go. There should be some constants.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I have two questions. One is for staff and one's for Councilor Nermella. So you just seem to have like some examples in your mind about what kind of things inclusivity has done. What is that you're referring to?
In terms of weighing in on specific, like whether it's a proclamation or it's a comprehensive plan or, whatever we should be our staff should be identifying, oh, this should go to our inclusivity board so that we can be advised.
Okay, that goes into my question for staff then. With that being said, my thought goes to, so those areas where we do lean on, say, inclusivity, like what does that look like year one? Because they're built into our process for like parks, if we do a renaming, not that I anticipate that's gonna happen all the time. I think that, there were a couple, and that's why we came up with the process, and it's like, oh, well, we should do this. But I don't anticipate that happening a whole bunch. But if it does, like, we still have to have that group. So like seeming to spin that up 3 times a year seems, that seems like it could be painful. So do you kind of have, when you say ad hoc, do you have that group already? Maybe it's, year one, it's the current inclusivity board, and they do more of a ad hoc in their meetings. It's not like you don't have to meet every month. You're gonna, we'll give you a certain amount of notice that you will have a meeting next month, or what does that look like?
Yes and yes. So that is true. It would be very difficult to spin these up like 3 times a year. So I imagine these groups would be tasked with whether it be a time period or whatever needs to be looked at specifically on a project. Staff does usually know what big projects we're working on, things like the comprehensive plan, the housing study, and things like that. We know it's coming, and so we could say, we know council wants to look at this from a inclusivity lens, and they want to look at it from an environmental lens. And so we could be working on those committees as we know those projects are coming forward.
So because I'm like, kind of as I envision it, then like it almost seems like what would be useful, because those things are gonna come up, instead of, spinning up ad hoc, that it's more of a kind of almost like human services, except for we have like a cycle with human services where we know we're gonna do these grants, but maybe it's, you have the group and then, they understand that X amount of times a year they're gonna meet on this Thursday or Wednesday of the month because they're gonna be tasked with something. That seems like then there's less of their time wasted and it's task oriented. So it's kind of in between what I have in my mind when I hear ad hoc versus what maybe operationally that looks like. So
Counselor Baker, I didn't get if you,
I am in favor of changing to ad hocs or task force, whether you like Latin or English.
and like with our environmental board, with us looking at recycling, trying to have a center, is that anywhere close that we could task them with that?
We, as Assistant City Manager, Lindsay, come forward and just share his thoughts on that? I know it's been a tough issue.
That's painful.
Those are eyes that.
This was not the question I was prepared for. Chris Lindsay, Assistant City Manager. Let me talk to the team and get back to you on this one.
Just getting a lot of pictures from community getting sick and tired of what they're seeing with our dumpster issues. And I think I've shared, and you might not have been here, but the Broomfield recycling right off of 120th and it's Nickel, I think, is the street. It's on the south side of the railroad tracks. And if you take a left, if you take a left, you go to Silterhar and all of that. If you go straight, you go past 120th and there. Anyway, that's where they have their recycling, because that's what we use, because everything's separated, there's always somebody on site. Some things for computers and whatnot, you can pay a little money and get rid of stuff. But anyway, they have a pretty comprehensive site there, and then they have two other sites sort of in the middle of the city for different things. But it'd be a good place to go visit, and Arvada's got a good one, and I'm not sure about Lakewood, but anyway, we need that desperately, sooner than later, and I don't know where it is on the budget, but a great thing that people are certainly knowing that we need with the city this size.
I absolutely agree with that. I do think, as I'm thinking through this is somewhere where feedback and buy-in with the rest of the community would help. So this could be an option with that project in particular. Thank you.
And just to give them a plug too, with what they did at the last council outreach I was at, they were really targeting the young people that were there and had them doing some real fun things and thinking outside the box. They did a good job, so. Okay, so I think you have, yes?
I was just gonna say, probably the IB would have some input on that would be valuable too, to make sure that we're thinking of all the different people.
Sure.
And is anybody else interested with that look on his face, what the question he was prepared for?
Subterfuge.
So I heard 5, and I heard everybody having lots of questions, whether it's defining, and what does advisory do, what does ad hoc do, and why transition. And I think we have to even look at the possibility of, do we need that advisory board period? Is ad hoc or task force, for whatever the needs are, a better something than pigeonholing people? So Just, I think you've heard a lot of comments, people. I've heard the majority say they're willing to look at it, but maybe move slower. Not everybody at once going to ad hoc, but try one and see where we're headed once we have a budget and we know the things that are happening. Maybe better decide what we try.
So if I could summarize real quick what I'm hearing. Recruit year-round, hearing that that's okay with everybody, so that seems to be a good thing. Video, I've heard some negatives, I've heard some positives. What I would ask is if it would be worthwhile to give it a try and see how it works, and if the council doesn't like it, then away we go. But it does make it easier for a group of 7 to do interviews if you do video interviews that you do on your own. And so if it's all right with the council, I'd like to just give it a try.
Is the video still two-way? That's
No, this would
or
be
is
a
it
recorded video.
A pre-recorded video?
Pre-recorded video
I don't know.
answering set, so no,
No.
yes,
No.
no, yes, yes, yes. Okay, so we got 4 and 3. So we'll give it a try. We can always go back, but we'll give it a try. And then,
Well, and stopping with that, it doesn't mean that we couldn't bring them in. I mean, it doesn't stop that from happening. It just might help us with,
screening.
yeah.
And then for the ad hoc committee, hearing that, yes, folks are interested, I think we said 5 would be willing to try an ad hoc committee. I'm not thinking it's a let's just abandon everything that we are doing so far, so I kind of think the idea of at least opening it up in our code to allow us to do this, and then maybe we try one in 2024 and give it a shot. Is that reasonable? Again, test the waters,
And it
proof
might
of
be the
principle,
word issue.
you know?
When you
and
say try one, do you mean convert one or add one?
just
to
add,
try?
add one in this case, I think is worthwhile. Call it an ad hoc, give it a specific task. Maybe the ward issue, if that gets voted in, is an appropriate task for us to do that, and let's just see how it works. You know, something, start time, end time, goals, you know, feedback in this mechanism.
I think that summarizes it good, and I think that's good. One thing I'd ask you to at least think about is, and maybe we see how ward shakes out, but if it's not wards, and say it's the recycle center, maybe we could pull from current boards so that they know it's about participation, because that's one that you're gonna want those different perspectives on, because it's a bigger issue than just one board. So maybe that's a good opportunity too to think about.
So, ward, if not ward, recycling center, you know.
Something like that, yeah.
Or housing needs or something, right? So, okay.
But we'll see if those eyebrows change.
Nope, that wasn't it either.
By the way, I thought with that we had decided on the recycling center that was something was moving on that. Nothing? We haven't done that?
We, to be perfectly honest, we've had groups out looking for sites, and we're just not finding good sites inside the city that are, if you will, conducive to the city as a whole. You know, you can find a site, you know, South Westminster, but then everybody on the north side, they're not gonna be happy, and you find something in the center, but then it's not zoned correctly, so then we've got problems operating it. You go to the north side, everybody on the south side is gonna hate that, so we're struggling with where's a good location that meets everybody's needs.
But we decided we're having a centralized, we're consolidating.
We haven't.
We just haven't found the site.
No, we haven't committed to that yet, but that was the guidance during a discussion we did last fall, I think, if I remember correctly, or beginning of the year, of let's look at that, and that's what we're trying to do, is figure out what
So
that
we gave
looks like.
guidance to look into it, but not to.
Not to pull the trigger, right, okay. So on this topic, is everybody satisfied that we've got a plan moving forward? So, year-round recruitment, we're gonna try video interviews. If we wanna follow up with an in-person, we could certainly give that a shot. We're gonna try an ad hoc moving forward into 2024, but we gotta fix the code first.
Can I just add, can we have some shape and parameters for when we call it up? Call up a.
Absolutely. And what that process looks like. Fair enough.
What about exit interviews? Can we start doing that?
Sure, yeah, we could do that.
Is the rest of the council okay with that?
I think it's good,
I'm
good
open to
data.
that. Sure. Okay, so add exit interviews. All right, good.
Does anybody care if they're like Survey Monkey that gets put together so that?
However they want to do it.
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes
Okay.
that's the most honest answer you're gonna get.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
You
All
got
right.
anything else?
That's it, Mayor.
Okay.
Okay, so now it's time to.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Abby.
Do we have reason for executive session?
Mayor, the final item on for tonight's post-meeting is an executive session. Pursuant to 111.3C6 of the Westminster Municipal Code, Colorado Revised Statute 246424D. This is for the purpose of reviewing and discussing potential changes to city facility security measures and related provisions of the city council rules and regulations.
Okay, we have reason for executive session. I'll go around, ask you to give your name and if you're willing to go into executive session.
Obie, is that a yes?
Rich Seymour, yes.
Lindsay Emmons, yes.
Bruce Baker, yes. Dave Demott, yes.
Sarah Nermella, yes.
Nancy McNally, yes. So we have permission to go into executive session.